Good morning, and in some parts of the world, good afternoon or evening. I'm Shari McMinn, and Donna O'Leary of Her Rural Heart has asked me to share a little bit about how my family and how your family can cope with the stay at home orders of coronavirus, otherwise known as COVID 19. I live in rural Colorado. I'm a farm wife. I'm actually a widow, but I still consider myself a farm wife. And I have 11 children, 9 of whom I have homeschooled, and I have 6 graduates with 3 more to go. So I'm home a lot with my kids. And I think I do have some wisdom to share with you ladies so that you can help your children be productive and build positive relationships during this time. Some of you probably are wondering who I am and why am I credentialed to be able to do such a talk. So I'll share just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas in the Midwest of the United States. And even though I was a city girl, I loved going to rural areas, especially my aunt and uncle's farm in South Dakota. And when I grew to become an adult, I had a career as a commercial interior designer, designing hotels and restaurants. And I met my husband, who was an architect, and he had grown up on a farm in rural New Mexico outside of Roswell. And he always wanted to return to an agrarian lifestyle. So by the time we had 6 children, we were outgrowing our little house in the city of Denver, and we faced a tragedy that happened, and we reevaluated our life and decided we wanted to purchase a rural farm and move our family there. So we did that about 20 years ago, and eventually then we adopted 5 more children into our family to total 11 children. And it's been just a great life. We live about a half an hour south of the town of Fort Morgan, Colorado, and Morgan County is a agricultural based community, and we just love it here. And even though my husband passed away 7 years ago, it's still my dream to live here, and it's a wonderful place to continue raising my family. The youngest 3 of my children are all teenagers, and I will become an empty nester in 2.5 years, and I'm looking forward to that. In the meantime, I've developed a writing and public speaking career because people ask me about my life and they say, oh, you should speak about that. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. I've written a number of books, and I just really enjoy encouraging people, coming alongside of them wherever they are in their life, and I especially love encouraging women like you because you're women like me. And I know that I don't have to explain myself about why I love my rural life and going out to my greenhouse or petting our goats or taking our dog for a walk up our half-mile long driveway. So today, I want to encourage you that this whole pandemic that we're experiencing in the US and Canada and Australia and every corner of the world. In fact, I just got a note from a missionary friend of mine in Ecuador yesterday. They are under stay-at-home orders in the jungle, if you can imagine that. Anyway, I just encourage you to use this as a time to look to the Lord as to what He is trying to tell all of us, but especially you and your family. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to slow down. Even our rural life can be slowed down. I know at one point in time we were taking 4 and 5 trips to town every week, and now we do it once every 10 days when we need to get a few more groceries. So it's a lot of time to be home. It's a lot of time to be with your children, your spouse, if you have a husband, and to just take life a little bit slower. So I wanted to let you know that I'm going to probably record another video on how to actually homeschool your children. This is going to touch on homeschooling a little bit, but I'm going to also record one that's called the nuts and bolts of homeschooling. And I hope to share that with you as well, because some of you may already be homeschooling, some of you may now be considering it, and I want to give you some real practical steps as to how you can actually do that and do it successfully. I think it's a wonderful lifestyle, and my adult children who are in their 20s and 30s all have very successful adult lives. They are believers, they serve the Lord in a wide variety of career fields, the military, filmmaking. One has an auto dealership, another is a sous chef. They're just kind of all over the map with different careers because they were able to develop their interests while they were homeschooling. So, I want to start addressing the COVID-19 effects on our lives. So, some of you may not have had your children home all the time with you, and now they are, and you're wondering, what do I do with my kids all day? And I can begin to answer some of those questions for you. At the end of this recorded interview, I'm going to share some online resources where you can go for additional follow up. So, those are going to be coming at the end. So, first of all, I want to encourage you that it is really important that you work on the relationships within your family during this time because it could be very stressful and traumatic. Everybody's lives are kind of turned upside down, and that's certainly true for our children who now are not seeing their friends as often. Maybe they're not going to their piano wrestling, their piano practice or their wrestling team tournaments, and they need to know that things will get better, but also things are good right now how they are because we can be together as a family and we can be thankful to the Lord that we have a home to live in. And if you're like me, you have a lot of land, you can go outside and play, you can be with animals. All of those things are very nurturing when stress arises. So, first, I would tell you that we need to maybe look at life in a more old fashioned way. Before the internet, before cell phones, before computers, before television, before radio, in the old days, people did things together. They worked together. Maybe the kids went to the little schoolhouse, that was a 5 mile walk, or they rode their horse there. But then they came home, and in the evening, people sat around the table and they talked. They did things together. Maybe women were quilting and men were cracking pecans. And I know this to be true because my in-laws, who are both deceased now, they had a pecan farm in New Mexico. And whenever we would visit them, we would sit around the table after dinner and we would crack pecans. And we did that for hours and we just talked, and it was just such a wonderful time. So I think the coronavirus pandemic is a perfect time to reclaim some of those better times. And I'm not saying everything was rosy about the 1900s, but I think we cherish relationships and we develop them more. So whether you are doing hobby craft or you are doing farm based chores together, feeding livestock at night, that type of thing, whether you are playing board games or simply listening to an audiobook together while the kids play Legos and the parents sit on the sofa, maybe dad is shining his shoes or mom is crocheting or knitting. These times can be very restorative and they can be very relaxing. And turn off that TV. I'm definitely a person who loves to watch a movie before I go to bed at night. But I also have started, now that it's spring especially, going for a walk with a couple of my kids and a couple of our dogs every night. My kids are jumping on the trampoline afterwards to wear themselves out, and we're just being together. I think reading aloud is a great thing. First of all, I love being read to. My parents still read books to each other as they drive. I like to listen to audiobooks, but I really like it when people read aloud to me. And I think that's a wonderful thing to cultivate. It's really good for our kids to read aloud because they're practicing their ability to speak and learn a higher vocabulary, plus just the richness of great classic books. And it could be fiction like a book such as The Yearling or the King Arthur series. It could be biographies of great people and leaders. I particularly love hearing about the Wright brothers and Teddy Roosevelt. There's a series by YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission Publishing, that you can find online, called Christian Heroes, and they have a faith series about missionaries. Those are just so good to either order the audiobooks or to read them aloud. And of course, with the wonder of Amazon and other online services, we don't have to go to the store. We can order things online and they can come to us. And of course, Audible is just an online subscription service monthly, and I sure enjoy that. You can download it on your phone, onto your computer, onto your car device, and listen to those great classic books together. So read alouds, I think, are really, really good. Anything that just involves being together. I know that our kids love to play card games with me. We love to play board games. There's a new one out, and I can't remember what it's called, something pig, and it involves hay bales and how you move them around on the board, and it's pretty fun, especially for rural families that know about livestock. I also think during the day it's good to get outside and do physical activity, whether you go for a walk, whether you play soccer or baseball or basketball. I'm 62 years old, but I still play with my kids and I love to do it. And they love it when I do it with them. And they're always shocked that I can actually hit a home run and I can win horse at basketball. But those are fun times. It's really important, I think, to be able to laugh with your kids, laugh at yourself during times of stress, especially like it is right now with our pandemic. So I would just encourage you that you can do things with your children, and that's a great relationship builder. Later on in the interview, I'm going to share an online resource that has 102 things kids can do at home to stay busy all day, and that is a really great thing. It's a list that was developed by the nonprofit I work for, Christian Home Educators of Colorado. A woman who's a volunteer for us wrote out the list, and it just has so many great ideas, from hands-on science experiments to enacting plays in the living room to building blanket forts. There's just a lot of great ideas on the list that I really encourage you to take a look at. Another question that may come up during this time is that because we have 6-foot social distancing and because authorities are trying to flatten the peak of the COVID-19 virus, all public schools and private schools, at least in the United States, are now requiring online learning at home. And that's a great thing to be able to do distance learning. But I really want to encourage you that the American Academy of Pediatrics still holds to the rule of no more than 2 hours of screen time a day for children. And that includes up through 18. So when we require our children, grade K through 12, to do online learning 4 to 6 hours a day, that's actually not a good thing for them. They are kids and they need physical activity, they need interaction with other people, and just staring at a computer all day is not the best way for them to learn. Learning with their body, learning with their hands, learning through verbal interaction, those are better ways to retain learning. In my homeschool talks that I give, I show what's called a learning pyramid. And the top of the learning pyramid, where the least amount is retained, is reading, and then it goes to listening to a lecture. And as you go further down to the wider base of the pyramid, the best retention is when you actually learn by doing and put your learning into practice by giving demonstrations, by doing hands-on activities, by teaching others. And that's really what our kids need, in addition to any reading or online learning that they're doing. For instance, if you have a child who's trying to master fractions, the best way for them to understand fractions is to have them help you cook, because you're measuring things in a measuring cup or with teaspoon and tablespoons. You are cutting a pie or a pizza into sixths and eighths of the round. There's just a lot of things that they can then see and do, instead of just doing the fractions on a computer screen. So I really recommend that, as much as possible, outside of their online learning, you are helping them discuss what they've learned, teach others what they have learned, do hands-on activities that support the learning, and more than anything else, sit around at your meal table and talk about what history they studied today. What did they learn in science? What did they learn in geography? And then build those into questions of, if you could go anywhere in the world as part of your geography studies, where would you go? And then everybody around the table shares that, because that is relationship learning, and you're putting into practice what they have learned on the computer. If a child is on the computer 4 or 6 hours a day, they should not be watching a movie at night or TV or anything else on the screen. They should be doing other things. So maybe your most important job during COVID-19 is to keep your kids off the screen. But of course, that requires us to be off the screen too, right? We can't be constantly on Facebook or listening to videos such as this. I mean, maybe you can listen to them without watching them. So our own example, of course, is super important. Another question that comes up, and this has come up in my community circles, is there are a lot of single parents who now are supervising their children's schoolwork, and they don't know how they're going to actually get their work done for their job. And some of them still actually have to go to work somewhere. Some can work at home on the computer, and they're wondering how they can do parenting, working, and school supervision all at the same time. Well, I want to encourage you that for 7 years, I have been a single parent, and it is stressful. It's hard. You have to be quite the juggler of all the different tasks that you do. But it also is an opportunity for your children to rise up and work with you and learn to do a lot of the things that they probably should be doing anyway. So how much of the housework can they take over? How much can they help you with your actual work? If you have a wide age of children, maybe you have a 15-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, how much can the 15-year-old and the 12-year-old help you with the other children while you're getting work done? Or can they help each other with their schoolwork? In the old days of the United States, we had a wonderful, wonderful leader named George Washington. And I just think he's so awesome. I've read a number of his biographies. I've read some of his own writings. And, you know, he was raised by a single mom, and he had to go to work full time, earning a living for the family at the age of 16. And prior to that, he helped a lot on the family farm doing other things. And it's remarkable that back in the 1700s, 16-year-olds could have incredible jobs. They could serve in the military and serve well as leaders, officers. They could attend the Ivy League schools that were already in place, Princeton, Harvard, and they could do so much at such a young age. And I know here in the United States, we tend to pamper our kids. And I pamper my kids. I cook really well for them. I take them places, I do things for them. But I also expect them to do a lot because I'm a single parent. So they clean the house every week for me. And of course, I've trained them over time. They take care of the animals for me. They help each other in different chores that need to be done or schoolwork that needs to be done. And they have learned to take responsibility for a lot of things that even 20 and 30-year-olds don't know how to do. So I encourage you that your kids can take on a lot more than what the typical first world nation family expects of their children. If we look at third world nations where children really aren't given much opportunity, and I'm not saying that's a good thing at all, I think children should be educated, they should be in a loving family, they should have a government that keeps them safe. But kids are going to work at the age of 4 and 5, and I don't necessarily think that's right. But I think in first world nations, 4 and 5-year-olds can certainly work alongside their parents and older siblings and do a lot. So I would just encourage you that if you're a single parent, or even if you're just a super busy two-parent household and now you have to accommodate learning and everything else that goes along with coronavirus, supervising your children, put them to work alongside of you. Help them learn to be independent and productive individuals, not just sitting in front of the TV all day, not just goofing off on video games, but they're actually doing productive work. Maybe they're cleaning the garage, maybe they're helping make a meal, maybe they're setting the table. Even a 3-year-old can help load the dishwasher. You might have a few broken glasses, but then they can learn to sweep the floor. So I just encourage you. They can do laundry, they can take care of their own rooms, and they can help you in a variety of ways. I know that when I have some work that needs to be done for my business, whether it's collating and stapling a bunch of papers, whether it's doing a mailing, my kids can be the best helpers I have. Every year in Colorado, we have a great homeschooling conference in June, and I'm on part of the conference committee planning group. And one or two of my kids helps me a lot with that. They can help me load things into my car as I'm heading to the conference, or they can actually be at the conference with me, helping me. And I think that is a great thing for them to do. They need to learn that they can be helpful and productive. They're part of a family unit, and that's what families do for each other. I've never paid my kids an allowance because, your personal and household chores are just something you're expected to do as part of a family. And it's good training because then when they get older, most of my kids at the age of 12, they had, a little side business they did. When we lived in an urban area, they did pet sitting and yard care for our neighbors. When we moved out to our farm, they helped collect the eggs and sell the eggs in town. They helped take care of their livestock, which then they showed at the county fair, and they got auctioned off for money. And so they got the money for that to put in their savings account. So all of these things that they can learn to do at home really are precursors to job skills for when they're an adult. And I think that is as an important part of learning as sitting in front of the computer and learning about, science or math or whatever. I think our kids are hurting in their knowledge of life skills. And I think as rural women, we have the perfect opportunity. And I'm sure a lot of you already do have your kids helping with you on your farm or ranch, just doing the practical aspects of life. So I encourage you that during this COVID-19 time, that's an excellent thing for them to be doing when they're off their computer. Another issue that may come up is that when your children have been going to a government-funded school, I know in the United States, if you're under a certain income level, your children can get free breakfast and lunch at school. And I have a friend who's a single mom, and she does foster care, and she now has all her kids at home. And she said, "How do you feed them?" And I said, "Well, it takes budgeting for sure." And I'm so glad that I live on a farm where we have our own farm meat, and sometimes we have a milk cow. We don't right now, but that's always been great when my kids were little. And we buy in bulk, and I have food in storage, and I have all those great things that rural living provides or really demands of you. And so there are people right now, and maybe some of your families are in the same situation where you're wondering, how can I now feed my kids 3 meals a day plus snack? So, first, I would encourage you that you can. And even if it's as simple and inexpensive of having oatmeal for breakfast every morning, peanut butter and jelly for lunch, and some kind of a meat and produce based dinner, especially when you have men in your family who are outside working, they need to have a substantial meal. You can do this. And of course, we're all supposed to be staying at home and not going to the grocery store too often. So, what my family has been doing is when we saw that COVID could be a problem, I went and spent some money I had in savings and stocked up on canned goods and things that were on sale, easily accessible. I did forget to buy toilet paper, so I had to order some on Amazon, but it did come. Um, but you need to go back to the idea of buying things in bulk. So instead of buying pre-made granola bars or expensive box cereal, maybe you need to buy the big bags or containers of oatmeal and make your own. Um, I always buy the discounted bread that's a day old. That saves me a lot of money. I keep it in my freezer. I can make a lot of things from scratch. That saves me a lot of money. Whatever's on sale, that's what you buy and that's what you fix. So when I went to the grocery store Sunday, because we went to a remote area where we could hike a big butte, and we were shocked at how many people had the same idea, and they also were there. But we could maintain our 6 foot social distancing on the trail. Anyway, when we came back into town, we filled our gas tank and stopped at the grocery store and got a few things. And the grocery store that I shop at is just a little locally owned market. It always has a markdown produce area, and it always has a markdown canned food area. And I always hit those first and try to get everything that they have for sale, which is usually at least half price. Um, and then I'm going to base some meals off of that during the week. And that saves me a lot of money. And I've had a big family when I had all of my kids living at home. Oh my word, I don't know how we fed everybody, but we did. And we just kept things simple. We probably ate a lot of potato salad, a lot of oatmeal, things that filled us up, but we also ate well and we made it attractive. It looked nice when we sat it on the table, and we all sat together, enjoyed the meal, and sat and visited. And that made the meal seem more filling. And especially because my first 3 children were boys, they ate a lot. And when they were teenagers, it was pasta, pasta, pasta is all I remember. And sometimes it had sauce on it. Anyway, so I would say buy in bulk when you can. And I have free delivery on Amazon, so that's great. So, I can order heavy stuff and have it shipped to me, but also see what's locally grown. And especially if you're a farmer and you have meat or eggs that you can trade or milk with somebody, I think is a great time to do bartering. And that's always a good thing to do. In a book I wrote a few years back, I had a whole chapter on frugal living. And one of the important things that I tell people when you're trying to live frugally is you want to be around like minded people. Because if you're around other people who are also living frugally, first of all, you can swap ideas. But second of all, you never have to apologize for the fact that you have oatmeal every day for breakfast. Sometimes there's raisins in it, sometimes there's apples in it, sometimes there's milk in it, sometimes there's sugar in it. But it's okay to live simply, because if you think about it, there's a lot of people in the world who are not having a meal at all, or they're eating rice that's given out by the UN or other agencies. And we are blessed with abundance in our first world nations, and we can grow a garden. During World War II, everybody had victory gardens, and I think we should have coronavirus gardens this year. This is a perfect time to be planting them. I know I've got my greenhouse planted, and sometimes we plant an outdoor garden too. But I'll look forward to being able to harvest my own herbs and tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce here in the next few months and put them up. If I have more than what our meals require, I can can them and have them for next year. So learn to live frugally and be with other people who are also living that way. Isn't it amazing how much money you save by not going into town all the time? And I know that when I had a career and I worked in the interior design and architectural field, which is very fashion oriented, had to spend a lot of money on clothing and gas and going out to lunch and all of these things. Then when I became a stay-at-home mom, all of a sudden we had like $100 more a month in our budget because I wasn't spending money on any of those things. So I think as long as you keep your spouse happy with what you're feeding people, and probably he needs more meat and variety in his diet than anybody else does. You can teach your kids not to be a picky eater and to be grateful for what's put before them. So I would say if now you're doing 3 meals a day plus snack at home and you've not done it before, try to be thoughtful about it, try to be frugal about it, and involve your kids with the shopping and the planning of it so they see what it takes to get it on the table. I'm going to take another drink of water. I hope you have some coffee or something you can take a drink. The next item I want to go to